Thanks for that intro, Steve. Ready when you are. All my life, I've always pushed myself outside my comfort zone. So it came as no surprise at all to my friends and family. In 2003, I wanted to become an Ironman triathlete. You know, something that everyone seems to have tattooed on the back of their legs once they've achieved it. Well, I started to train, swimming, cycling, and running. But I chose to do it through visualization, through actually imagining what it was like to swim, cycle, and run instead of actually physically doing it. So my first half Ironman, one word describes it, it was pain, and the subsequent weeks thereafter. So I decided to shelve that part of my life. I emigrated to Australia. I bought a dilapidated building, turned it into a guest house, restaurant, and wine bar, and had far too much fun. And so the dream of becoming an Ironman, which are those distances, were just put to the wayside. I carried on partying and living my life and entrepreneuring as well. But I always held an interest in triathlon. So I kept a vague, I always researched what it was about. In the 1920s, the first triathlon happened. Yet it was in 1980 when three guys over a few beers in Hawaii decided to settle a bet in who was the fittest. And so the Ironman brand was born. Swim, cycle, run, brag for the rest of your life. Back in the 80s, sport was quite basic. People cycled on a steel bicycle borrowed from your mother with trainers, and basically the food was sandwiches, even people ordered pizza takeaway, and people fitted training in throughout their regular lives. There was no money. Nowadays, it's a completely different ball game. The bikes are 100% carbon frame, everything is aero, everything is measured to the milligram, including what you eat. Everything, I'm sure you've seen it around, there's a lot of electrolyte talks and gels, and everything's highly processed. The training is also quite extensive. For average, people swim on average 6 miles, cycle 350 miles, and run 35 miles a week. So over 9 months, that's swimming from Cardiff to Tenby and back again. Cycling from Anchorage to Florida, return. And running from Land's End to John O'Groats, return. That's what the elite are doing. So on average, that's 40 hours training a week. The future, in my opinion, for triathlon can't be much more improved with the equipment we have. The bicycles are at the absolute peak of what's available. As I said, it's all carbon frame and there's not much more improvements we can make. So there's basically only 2 areas that we can work on. One is the body that actually fuels all this, the athlete themselves. People are realizing that 40 hours a week swimming, cycling, and running is actually quite unproductive. So they're focusing more on recovery. They're cutting out the junk miles and only doing about 20 hours a week. And again, the elites are resting throughout that time instead. And the second thing is the fuel for the body. And they're turning back to nature. They're moving away from the scientific processed foods and going to whole food plant-based diets. I'm quite happy about that because I'm a vegan as well. So back to me. I have to improve on that finisher's pick. So in 2013, I signed up for my first ever Ironman in Australia. I start training in earnest, and 11 months later, here I am walking to for registration, in my first ever Ironman. And yes, my finisher pick has improved. And luckily, by finishing these triathlons, I earned some points. And I actually find myself on Australia Age Group World Championship competition in China. And how do I know how hard it is to train to be a world champion triathlete? Because while working full-time, I also won my age group and became a world champion. So where to next? As I said, and Steve covered earlier, I'm always pushing myself outside my comfort zone. So now it's a bit of a mental game, sitting on that bike for 24 hours and see if I can crack myself. Thank you.